This is effectively the home screen of your CaseWare working papers file. It uses a folder analogy. And the first thing to understand is that this is fully customizable. So, this is called FIR areas. So that would be appropriate or relevant in Ontario or Alberta. But if you were in British Columbia, and this should be actually called LGDE areas. The point is very easy. You're not calling programmers or consultants to make these changes. You can reorder, relabel, restructure your document manager so that it exactly duplicates your presentation requirements. And the way to think about the document manager is it's like the index to your audit binder. If we make the assumption here for a moment that everyone's thinking about this from an annual audit perspective, how do we want to group our documents and lay out our file so that we can guide our staff through the completion of the year end? And we can guide the auditor through their audit. Why? Because we want to save our staff time and we want to save the auditor time. So this is all fully customizable. Now, just before I go on, the other thing I want to point out is the demonstration that we're about to do for you assumes that CaseWare has been set up and implemented. So this is what it would be like working with CaseWare in your first live year end. So we've got CaseWare configured and squared away. For example, we've got so here, let's just close this up. Under statement of financial position, under assets, we've got a bunch of different assets listed here. Here's our receivables lead sheet, and you'll notice it's 0. So for purposes of this presentation, what I've done is to show you the power of the product is I've deleted the GL. So this is sort of the magician rolling up his sleeve, showing you that I don't have anything pre-baked here. So we don't have a GL in the file. What we do have in terms of setup is we've got a financial statement built. So we've got a template for our statement. Here's what the statement of financial position should look like. But you'll notice there's no balances here. And this is sort of the background that we're going to start with. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the data that we need to power that report. So we're going to import some data into this CaseWare file. So when we do this with our clients, typically we would find the right report in their ERP system, whatever that ERP system is. We'd get you to dump that out to Excel, and we would suck that in from Excel. So we pointed at an Excel file, and it's just as simple as, quite literally, pointing it at an Excel file. And during implementation, we will have defined a layout file that teaches CaseWare how to read the spreadsheet. And so once that's done, as a user of the system in your first live year end, very typically, you're just going to be able to say next, 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 done. And this is CaseWare reviewing that file, allowing you to make changes if things have changed from one year to the next. In our case, nothing has changed. So we're going to be able to say next, 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 import. Now, let me just pop open my timer here. So I'm on the West Coast, 10:31 a.m. That Excel file has about 3,000 GL accounts in it. That took us about 60 seconds to bring in 3,000 GL accounts. And we're going to start to show you the fundamental differences between working in an organized, database-driven solution versus, sort of a wide array of spreadsheets and word processing documents. Step number 1 is we have a full audit trail that's starting immediately. What user brought in what file? What GL balances did they bring in? Current year, prior year, and budget? When did they do this? And so really commonly, you're going to have another 100 or a new 1,000 GL accounts that we need to deal with this year versus last year. And if account records had existed before this import, CaseWare would show us all the new GL accounts right here so that we know there's work that we've got to do. Here's 1,000 new GL accounts that were just added. Please go teach CaseWare where those accounts belong. Try doing that in a spreadsheet. Good luck to you. You now need to figure out what your new GL accounts are versus the old ones and make sure you have modified formulas to include them. So not only do we get an audit trail, CaseWare is already starting to do a bunch of this analysis for us. Why? Because we've got a standardized database running. I just did that import. I come back into my financial statements. We're going to go back to that statement of financial position. And now we see our statement of financial position has been fully populated. Our statement of operations has been fully populated. we jump down to our investment section or our sponsorship receivable or our debt limits notes. So the idea is that we built our template, we imported our data, and it fully populated our financial statements for us. So draft financial statements in, what was that, 60 seconds? Now I should point out that those draft financial statements will still need work. There's maybe some new pronouncements that you need to address. There are some reallocations, some accruals and deferrals, and maybe some other basis entries. You need to go from modified accrual to full accrual, perhaps. So the numbers may not be the right numbers yet, but we've got a good draft set of financial statements right at the front end of your year-end prep. For 90% of our clients, they don't get draft financial statements until one of the very last steps of the year end. And what that means is all that work about ensuring agreement between statements and notes and schedules happens on this mad dash stage because you're under so much pressure. You don't have any more time to spend. We're going to give you a much wider window to do your work in while compressing the amount of time you need to spend. So let's come back and walk you through a little bit of the workflow for how these financial statements come together. And open up that receivables lead sheet. And here we're going to see our GL accounts. Let's open this up. These are all the GL accounts that relate to receivables. During implementation, we taught CaseWare that these were our receivables accounts. And in fact, we subcategorized it. So in this file, and this is a Canadian local government file, by the way, we've got $12.9 million in receivables broken out into these categories: trade, sponsorship, taxes current and arrears, federal, provincial, and other. And so why would I subtotal this way? Perhaps because I've got a footnote or a note to the financial statements that I need to break down into these categories. So I've done my grouping thinking about not just statement or schedule level reporting, but I'd also think about it from the perspective of what do I need to break out or group for my notes? What do I need to break out or group for my state or provincial level reporting, like the FIR, for example? So we tackle that at the front end during the planning and design stage. So when we brought the data in, it was naturally grouped the way we needed it. So if we imagine now that we've got these GL accounts imported, to get prepared for the auditor to come in, we're going to start to provide support for all these numbers. And so maybe we go back to SAP or JD Edwards and we find, I don't know, let's say here, this utilities account. We want to provide the subledger for this utilities account so that the auditor can sort of see what we're dealing with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine that I went back into JD Edwards or SAP. I printed that AR subledger off and I saved it out to some directory somewhere on our system. Oops, there. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to go find that PDF. Here it is, AR aging detail. And I'm going to grab it and drag it onto my document manager. And I'm going to put it in the right spot. So this is going to be support for my receivables lead sheet. So I'm going to put it underneath C.1. And I copy it here. And there I now have C.2. So here's CaseWare acting as the document management system for us. It actually put a copy of that PDF right in our electronic audit binder. Because what we want to do at the end of our prep is hand the CaseWare file to our auditor directly so that they have all the support they need in an electronic file. I'm going to double click on C.2 and that comes our receivables lead sheet. And here's our $23,000 of receivables. And if I come back into my receivables lead sheet here, there's my $23,000. But instead of forcing someone to figure out that this number supports, this value on the lead sheet, we're going to right click and we're going to annotate and we're going to say, listen, I don't know, let me just take a look at the attendee list here. Ali, you're at the top of the list here. So Ali is my manager. I'm preparing this document for Ali. So I'm going to say, listen, Ali, if you want to see the support for this value, I'm going to suggest that what you do is you go to C.2. And here, Ali, I'll just tell you right now that this value agrees to the GL. And then this is going to be my note for the auditor. We review this AR subledger monthly for doubtful accounts. And so what we've done is we've added a note to the file, and if I hover over the little one, we see both my explanation, my note, and we see the audit trail, who made this and when. If I slide over, I see my tick mark. And here, C.2, when I click on that now, it's going to jump me down to my C.2 document so that people can see where that number is coming from, show me the support. And in fact, on the far side, I could do a reference here too. I suspect some of you came out of public practice. So here's your to from referencing. And this is C.1. So if somebody was on this page and wanted to see where this number went to, well, C.1 is where it goes. C.2 is where it comes from. So we're making it really easy to follow the trail. And this is going to have a bunch of benefits. One, the auditor is going to be spending way less time with you in your office asking for support and trying to understand how things come together. And maybe even more valuably, as an organization, you will have a way more detailed infrastructure in place so you can recreate your year end next year and the year after and the year after. You're providing a roadmap for all others to follow for how your financial statements get pulled together, what support's required, how does it tie in. Okay, so I said that I report to Ali, and this is the work that I did. Ali asked me to support all the material values. I am a very lazy individual. Ali, you should never have hired me. Very poor choice. I'm going to sign off on this document. There's my initials completed by J. Black, 2/27/2017, and I'm going to escape. Back on my document manager, you can see my initials. So when I sign off on documents and I say that I'm done them, Ali can tell immediately that these documents are ready for her review. In fact, she can filter the document manager and say, only show me documents that are ready for my review. So hide all the documents that are still in progress. So now Ali comes in and she reviews my work. So she opens up C.1 and right away she knows she's in trouble. There's only one document, one line item, one GL account that's been supported here. So now instead of, Daryl likes to say, hiding behind the ficus and tackling me as I walk down the hallway, or catching me at the coffee machine, which is where I spend 80% of my time apparently. One of the things Ali can do is she can right click and she can add a new document issue. In other words, it's a review note that she's going to create electronically and keep in one central location inside the CaseWare file. So now Ali's note for me is need to provide support for, she's angry. We're going to go to all caps now. All material values. And she doesn't say it, but we know that what comes after that is you moron. Sorry, Ali. Maybe you're really irritated with me. Now, what type of issue is this? It's a review note, so we can categorize our issues. One category of issue might be notes for the auditor or opportunities for improvement for next year. Sometimes when you're doing the year end, you realize, listen, if we just did the accounting slightly differently, these numbers would just fall out. We wouldn't have to do all these manual gyrations at year end to figure this out. So we're going to call this one a review note. Ali's going to assign it to someone. She's going to assign it to Jamie. She can provide an explanation here. She's no longer as angry. It's not all in caps. And she can specify a due date. Jamie, this has got to be done by the 3rd of March. Otherwise, we're not going to meet our deadlines. And so now Ali can send out that note to me via email if she likes, but we have one central location here where it's all being tracked. And if we look on the left-hand side, Ali or Ali's manager or Ali's manager's manager can see how many outstanding issues we have in the file. In other words, how far are we away from being complete? So hopefully you're seeing here not just financial reporting, not just document management, but we're going to do sort of workflow and issue tracking. We're going to sort of manage the entire reporting process. And the last thing I want to show you before I jump over and spend more time on the financial statement side of things is that it's actually quite simple to work inside the document manager. So one of the other things we often recommend to our clients in terms of building a tighter year-end file, or tight budget file, really, for that matter, budget book, is doing some analysis at the front end. Instead of waiting for the auditor, in the case of the year end, to come back to you with a bunch of questions, let's answer those questions before they're even asked. So I'm going to come to general work, and we're going to come under general documentation. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new document to show you how simple this really is. And I'm going to create what's called an automatic document. And it's automatic in the sense that you don't need to spend any time from a formatting or calculations perspective. So I'm going to click on automatic and we're going to create a new variance analysis document. Very typically, your auditor will look at your balances this year versus last year to find material differences, and then you got to explain them. Or this year versus budget, and you've got to explain them. So we're going to create a new document, VAR, for variance 1. And this is going to be current year versus prior year. And there's going to be an analytical review document. So we're just going to answer a couple questions here. How do you want to calculate your variance? I want to do it by group with group subtotals. And I'm going to use a particular grouping mechanism. There's 13 concurrent grouping mechanisms inside of CaseWare that you can take advantage of. So you can slice and dice and pivot your data 100 different ways. So we're going to group by map number. And we're going to say, listen, show me all groups where the difference current year versus prior year is more than $30,000. And it must be more than a 15% difference. So if the balance this year is 10 million and last year the balance was 9.5 million, okay, fine, that's more than 30,000, but it doesn't exceed our threshold percentage perhaps. We're going to say, okay, there's our new document. I'm going to open that up. And here we're seeing the analysis immediately. Last year, the balance was $0. This year, it's 11.6 million. Amount change is 11.6, and that's 100% change. Oh, it's pulling up balance sheet accounts or statement of financial position accounts. Maybe for our purposes at this moment, we don't care about those. So I'm going to come back into my document properties and say, listen, let's filter this because I only want to see my operating accounts, my revenues and expenditures. So from 300 to 699, we'll say okay. So it's really easy to modify these documents as well. There's no programming involved. I didn't have to get on the phone to IT to do any of this stuff. It took me about, if I stop blithering for a minute, it would probably have taken me about 12 seconds to do. And then again, so here, transfers to individuals and organizations, 2.3 last year, 699, 2.3 this year, 699 last year. I can come in and I can add a new note where I explain what this variance is so that the auditor doesn't have to come in my office and ask me the question. I'm going to save some time and give them the answer to their question before they even ask it. That's current year versus prior year. I want to do current year versus budget. So I just press Control C and Control V, copy and paste on my document manager, and it created a new document for me, VAR2. I'm going to come into my document properties, and I'm going to choose BY for renaming it, in other words, for budget year. And I'm just going to change the balance type to budget. And I could change the thresholds if I wanted, but I'm happy with those thresholds for actual versus budget. And there's my new actual versus budget analysis as well. So hopefully that made sense for you. In terms of the ease of use and setting this document, the documents up the way you want, and the kind of time you're going to save here. We've got clients that just on the variance analysis piece alone spend hours and hours and hours just pulling together a report that's filtered the right way. This, if you had it on your document manager like this, it would be done waiting for you the moment your import was completed. So let me shift gears just slightly here and continue our discussion about the actual financial statements. So the first thing I would like to point out is some of the significant differences between financial reports generated in CaseWare versus sort of a spreadsheet and word processor solution. I'm going to click on the cash value here. That's the sound of me trying to overtype the value. In other words, maybe let me just increase my magnification a little bit here. We have very granular controls built into this report to prevent the most common causes of errors and mistakes. You're not just going to overtype a value accidentally, yet we're going to give you a bunch of flexibility, and that tends to be the problem. You can lock down Excel so you can't do anything in it, and then it becomes roughly useless. Inside of CaseWare, what they realized was if we ensure the integrity of certain areas, we can allow modification in other ways and still mitigate the risk of error. So for example, if the reason I was trying to overtype this number was because I didn't want cash to be the first row anymore, I wanted that to be taxes receivable. Well, you don't overtype the value. You can see that this row, taxes receivable, is being powered by a group code. In this case, the group code is maybe a little small for you, but it's 115.200. So if I were to choose up here 115.200, watch what happens on that first row. It now becomes taxes receivable. The description changed dynamically and the amounts changed. So we've ensured consistency on that row, description and amounts, but we were able to modify our table structure. Or maybe what I wanted was I want to put in a subtotal. I highlight the rows where I want a subtotal. I'm going to come up and drop in a subtotal here. Now let me just draw your attention before I do that. Look at the totals here at the bottom of my asset section, 13.4 and 11.386. I'm going to drop in a subtotal, and you will note that I did not just break my totals. Those did not change. On inserting a subtotal, CaseWare was smart enough to come down to my total totals and ensure that we don't double count. Don't include the rows and the subtotal in the total. So again, you're starting to see some of the intelligence that CaseWare brings to bear in its reporting solutions. It's not just some generic report writer. We understand what we're trying to accomplish, so we can think ahead and mitigate the risk of error. Just as we continue to talk about that sort of intelligence idea, so maybe we need some new rows, right click, I'm going to drop in some new rows here for you. 3 new rows. Because there are some new disclosures that we need. Well, those rows have automatically been included, my subtotal and my total, and I'm now free to choose the various GL accounts that I want. So there's my cash row back. And I don't need that taxes receivable anymore. The auditor changed their mind. So we're going to come up and delete that top row. We're going to say, okay. Now I'm going to come in and right click and say, I want to sort my rows manually. And I'm going to take cash. I'm going to move cash back up to the top. So the point here is you've got a lot of flexibility, and here's the intelligence part. Do you notice how held to maturity is blue? And what about these other $0 rows that I just inserted? Watch what happens when I go to print preview. You're going to see that CaseWare is smart enough not to print those rows. We told CaseWare, listen, if there are no balances in any of the columns, don't waste our time, automatically skip those rows. And we can do that for columns. We can do that. We can say, listen, turn off the inventory note. If the total inventory is less than materiality, dynamically turn off the inventory note. So we can take some of that professional judgment that you apply to the statements on the fly and build it into the tool set so that these common sort of time-consuming tasks are automated for you entirely. So it's a little bit about the intelligence piece here. So hopefully you're seeing you've got some good flexibility. You can manipulate these and manage these statements fairly readily as they evolve over time, adding rows, deleting rows, subtotals, etc. Let's talk about some of the other items that I know you're going to need to do. So here we've got our taxes receivable line item. If we look in our sort of bookmark list here on the left-hand side, I can see that I've got a taxes receivable note, note number 6. So one of the things that very commonly I might want to do is add a reference. So if people wanted more information about taxes receivable, they would know there was a note. So I'm going to right click on this row. I'm going to modify my note number reference. I'm going to say, listen, if you want to see more info, please go down to note number 6. We're going to say, okay. And now I've got my little note reference, note 6. If I click on it, it jumps me down to it. So here we are down on note 6. And then the auditor decides, or you decide, or Ali decides, she doesn't want this to be note 6 anymore. So she comes in and says, listen, I want to sort my notes. I'm going to take my tax receivable note, and I'm going to move that down here. It's going to be underneath debt limits for some strange reason. We're going to say, okay. CaseWare does some fancy footwork and does some recalculations. Here we can see taxes receivable is now note 9. If I come back up to my statement of financial position, you'll notice my note reference has been adjusted. You're going to see the same things with page numbers and table of contents numbering and schedule numbering. You sort them around in case we'll worry about the minutia, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, so to speak. Come back down to our notes. All the things you saw above, the ability to insert rows or delete rows or sort rows or add subtotals, All that stuff is available for you throughout your notes as well. And I should point out, one of the things that tends to be complicated is I need to be able to do word processing and sort of tabular work in one central location. That's no problem. If we have allowed it, this is a word processor too. Complete with spell checking and all that sort of good stuff. If we think about the common problems when it comes to sort of managing the financial statements, is that they aren't perfectly static. They do evolve over time. We have 2 new notes to add this year, some new PSAT or GASB pronouncement. When you purchase the financials template from CaseWare International, you're going to get with that a content library that you can leverage. That content library will allow you to come in and say, listen, the auditor says I need a new note. So I'm going to click on notes. What type of note is it? Well, the auditor says I need a new receivables note. So I'm going to come down to assets. And all of these sections contain tons and tons of different notes that CaseWare has prepared for us. Depending on the library that you purchase from CaseWare, it will have different types of content. So if you buy the ASPE library, you get the ASPE content. If you buy the GASB library, you get the GASB content, and so on. In this case, I'm going to come down to receivables, and I'm going to click on one of the notes. You see a print preview of that note here. $12.9 million is the total. You may recall $12.9 million was the total of our lead sheet. So it already balances. We're going to say, okay, and in comes our new note. And I think it's going to drop in as note number 2. Here it is. So here's our new receivables note. And a couple things should be apparent. One, we now have 22 notes instead of 21. So it renumbered all their notes dynamically. 2, I now don't have to start from scratch to build out my new receivables note. And again, we're seeing some of that intelligence, the blue rows here for the rows that we'll skip. I can add and delete and all the rest. And we tie into our 12.923. But CaseWare is starting to show some of its review automation abilities here. We're getting a warning that we're off by $1 in the prior year. So really, and it might be a little bit difficult for you to see with this magnification. Let me try and bump this up a bit. So what we've said here in this table is that this table of numbers added together ought to agree with a group called 117, but it doesn't. We're off by $1. Imagine, for example, let me just flip this around here. Imagine this line item was turned on. We're going to come up here and choose investments. So imagine I had incorrectly included investments in my receivables area. It's warning me, you're off by $21 million. There's something wrong here. This is supposed to agree to total receivables. So CaseWare is doing some analytics for you behind the scenes to try and detect problems and mistakes. And in fact, we can go quite a bit further here if we like. And we can tell CaseWare, listen, this number here should agree to this number up on the statement of financial position. And if it doesn't, dynamically, automatically plug due to other governments if the difference is less than $5. So we'll have CaseWare manage those little minor rounding discrepancies for us. So we don't have to spend a bunch of time and energy doing it. We can run reports, CaseWare's diagnostics lists or diagnostic reports, where it will show us any variances or any calculations. Listen, total cash on the statement of financial position doesn't agree to cash the bottom of cash flow. And those formulas can be as complex as you like. Again, so you don't have to manually ferret your way through the statements to find these problems. CaseWare will give you a diagnostic list of here's all the problems that we have detected. Those are fully customizable by you, the end user. To wrap up and to show you sort of one of the most powerful pieces of this puzzle, the most painful problems that we regularly hear about from clients, I'm just going to come back up to my statement of financial position. And let me just minimize a little bit here so you can see the whole thing. You see these little red squiggles? This is kind of like track changes in Word and Excel. It's showing us when values change after they've been reviewed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear those flags for a moment. And I'm going to save my work. And then I'm going to come back into CaseWare. And I'm going to simulate the worst thing ever, which is the last minute adjustment. And at the parent level, here we go, 2-3057. So we are going to debit sponsorship receivables for, let's say, $1 million or $100,000. And the other side of this entry, we're going to code to, I'm not sure the GL account, but it's going to go to grants, let's say, receivable. Here we go. So that's grants revenue, I should say. So here we've debited receivables and credited our grants revenue. And now when I come back into my receivables lead sheet, we're going to see that that adjustment has already been posted. Our lead sheet's been updated. So we're now not 12.923 million, which is what we imported from our GL. We're now at 13 million. And it might be the kind of thing I would like to be notified of, that that GL value has changed since I reviewed that document. That's very trivial to do, actually. View, and we're going to auto compare. And you notice how those lead sheets changed? Because they are now different than what they used to look like. When I open them up, there's my $100,000 difference. I'm now going to go open up my financial statements. And you will notice the little red squiggle appear underneath my sponsorship receivables. And if I were to jump down to my notes, they've all been automatically updated for me. And I'm being notified that they've changed, so that as I go through as the reviewer, I can see those differences. I'm aware of them, and I can agree, yep, that's fine. I'm going to clear that change flag. I'm accepting that change. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.